You got John McMullen and Jody McDonald, your Birds 365. You're joined by Brooks Kubena, making his way in Philadelphia, learning to be a Delaware Valley native. How's the process going, Brooks?
It's good. I'm on my third Airbnb in a couple months, and the second one was the one that I felt like I got most indoctrinated. Some random person started throwing fastballs at my front door, exploded hands and stuff until I finally moved out. So they must have seen my Texas license plates or something.
Oh, see, that's just not right.
Yeah, you got to get that switch quickly. Yeah, you got to make that switch quickly. It's ironic, Brooks. I think you've gotten the full, and now you tell me you even gotten more of the Philadelphia experience. But from a football sense, you've gotten it already. You got the Heights when they're 10-1, and all the chests are pumped out, and this is the greatest team in the history of the world. And now you're seeing 2 losses, and everybody wants everybody fired. How's that experience been for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the highs and the lows here. And that shows the expectations, right? I mean, the team was pretty much, one loss to the Jets coming in, and then seeing how dynamic the team could be, and also how heroic some of the players could come through in some huge moments against some major teams. But even through those games, it was clear that there were some flaws that might take over. Those were things that I wrote through that time too. And now seeing those culminate in 2 very embarrassing losses, I can understand some of the response of people who thought that this team might have been a Super Bowl contender. So, yeah, I mean, this is as invigorated a fan base as I've ever been around. So, seeing their interest, and obviously when everything's go terribly wrong, the response is kind of warranted in some ways and understandable for sure.
Speaking of heroes, if you're going to be a hero in the NFL, don the superhero cape. Chances are you're going to have to be a quarterback. And last year, Jalen Hurts was pretty damn heroic for this football team, runner-up for the MVP. This year, a drop-off. If you've got a grasp on it, if you could tell us why you think that is, love to hear it from a guy, because we were all indoctrinated. We were here every single game last year. You bring a different perspective. You're joining the fray this year, not here last year. Can you see something that maybe we're not seeing because we're too used to the Jalen last year as to why this year's Jalen isn't as good as last year's Jalen?
Yeah, I can't guarantee that my fresh perspective is going to be anything different than you maybe haven't thought yourselves already. But coming into this and looking at some of the games before, this was a team in some ways that was maximizing its wide receivers, at the very least this year, like getting to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Brown was on a record tear by the time that I showed up and watched. And the difference that I think really changed things the last month for sure is that Dallas Goedert was out. And I think that had a lot to do with a lot of the problems getting the ball down the field in the passing game. There was a play to start, I believe it was the 49ers game, where people were seeing how Jalen Hurts maybe had a deep shot downfield that he wasn't taking. But, Nick Sirianni admitted that wasn't even a read for that tight end. I mean, they had three guys at tight end, and only one of them had secured a catch all year. So that eliminated a lot of options in the passing game. You could see how Jalen Hurts, working through his progressions and whatever was available to him, there really weren't that many options beyond Brown and Smith. And when teams were doubling A.J. Brown, there really wasn't much else to go. And he wasn't really using his legs as much. And we started to see that against the Cowboys early on. And that, honestly, I have a lot of questions. What if they hadn't fumbled 3 times in that game, especially at the start of it, how quickly would things have unraveled? Because they were moving the ball. That was, I think, a little bit more of the Hurts people had saw last year, because he was part of that high-octane rushing attack, and he had scampered for close to a 15-yard game before he fumbled there, and who knows what points that would have reached. But they just don't seem like they're in rhythm, and that includes Jalen, and that includes a system the past month that's been trying to figure it out without Goddard. They got him this time, and I think turnovers are really the major reason why it didn't function on Sunday. If they eliminate that, then I think you start seeing the offense that people are more familiar with.
You mentioned options, Brooke, and targets. It was notable in Dallas, only 3 players got targets, and Nick Sirianni's very honest about the offense and his offense, and he said it probably 100 times behind the scenes, and he went on record with it again. So you got to see it. This offense runs through A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. However, if you look at a average game, you're going to have 7, 8 guys get targets, whether they're effective or not. No one's going to complain about, as you mentioned, AJ's historic streak of 125 straight yards in 6 consecutive games. Never happened before. It's not an issue when he's dominating. But that does concern me when you only have 3 guys getting targets. Is that just an anomaly you overlook and say, it's just that game? Or well, what did you make of that?
Yeah, there are 2 ways that I look at that. That's either one, a choice that's very direct from them to choose to go to Brown and Smith, and that's it, pretty much. Or it's a choice based on the circumstances and realities of what they have on offense, because your idea isn't incorrect. It's definitely something that most teams are, they want to utilize their whole entire wide receiver core. It draws the attention of the defense. It can eliminate Brown being double teamed. It can, you want to be able to use the entire space instead of just using some receiver that just goes downfield and it's not even part of the progression at all, just trying to clear things up. Because if defenses know that, then they're not going to bother to even really pay attention to that part of the offense. So, and I think that's more to say that in an admission that their wide receiver depth beyond those 2 isn't even worthy of being a part of the game plan, which is a problem.
Yeah.
And that they came in and signed Julio Jones in the middle of the season, and I believe he's got 3 catches in the past month. So
and they're all bubble screens.
Yeah,
they don't even get it down the field.
That's either an obstinance by the offensive minds in the team that they're only going to go to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, which I guess is a possibility, but it may be more that they just don't trust the rest of the wide receivers to be large parts of the game plan, which is a problem, which is maybe even a bigger problem whenever you're looking down the line. But you can't, I don't, the way that defenses have been able to shut down A.J. Brown the past month just by doubling him and not really worrying about the rest, and how they've been going to Devontae Smith a lot on hitches, slants, goes. It seems like he's the most involved because of the attention that's being paid. But, I mean, we're starting to see a couple of times, I think it was the beginning of the 49ers game where they Hurts hit A.J. Brown for a lot of slants to begin the game. And then we started to see that incorporated in the Cowboys game too, letting him beat his man on short routes down the field. But it's got to be a more balanced offense. We've seen that in a lot of other teams. It's interesting that when you have two such dynamic receivers that you can't get anything out of the other receivers that are on the roster because they're demanding so much attention. You're telling me that they can't get the ball in these situations. Maybe they can't. So that would be an even larger issue. So, which means they're very limited in what they can do offensively.
All right. One more offensive question, and I'm going to flip over to the defense. That's should be the bigger issue. Because let's be honest, their defense has been worse than their offense. So
yeah.
One more offensive question. If you have both DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell, sorry, Boston's you got one more week to wait. Then you get the Giants and Boston.
Rashad Penny week. Don't forget about Rashad Penny going home.
Throwing that out there. I don't think it's happening. Your evaluation of DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell, it gets me a little upset when there's a given week that Kenny Gainwell touches the ball more than DeAndre Swift. And that was the case 2 weeks ago against the 49ers. I just didn't understand it. Give me your scouts evaluation within this team structure, the Philadelphia Eagles, but their talent as well, of the comparison between Gainwell and Swift. Is one better than the other? One better on the other plays? Ridiculous, can't even comp the two. How do you compare Kenny Gainwell and DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, it's a situation where I think where they were bringing Gainwell in more often, and the type of runs that they were running and options to perhaps pass in those situations. I think Gainwell has a little bit more of an overall ability. Um, and I think that may have been partly why he played so much more frequently in that game. I do think DeAndre Swift is the more proficient runner. And we've started to see more of that in the last couple of games before the Cowboys game on Sunday, where Brian Johnson was starting to incorporate a lot more jet sweeps, a lot more 21 personnel using both Gainwell and Swift. And Swift would come in from, I don't know, wide receiver slot. And that led to a couple of times where the run game broke open in some of those comeback victories. I I don't know why they've abandoned that. It's in terms of the jet sweep and some of those looks that helped out the run game, but at the same time, whenever Jalen Hurts was, getting more carries at the start of the Cowboys game, it was Gainwell that was in there, so they may like that situation a lot more whenever they're talking about zone reads and run pass options. In those cases, perhaps Gainwell's more the person they want in there. Perhaps Hurts chooses pass, and maybe that allows the defense to organize themselves differently. So that's really the explanation without asking is probably what I would guess.
At B Kubena on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, X.com. Make sure you follow Brooks there. I bring it up. You put an interesting stat up on your X account, Brooks, about third and medium situations on defense. So
Yeah,
that's 4 to 6 yards over the last 3 games. And look, they played 3 really good quarterbacks having really good seasons in Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott. In those situations, they are 10 of 11 for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that's a 158.3 passer rating, which for those who don't know, that's perfect in NFL parlance. And if you extend it to 4 to 7 yards, it still stays perfect. You would think at some point somebody would get a hand up and tip a football. Something would happen negative that would make this defense look a little bit better. If you're Sean Desai and you're going through all this and people are showing up at the Novacare complex with placards, fire Sean Desai, is it just you don't have talent? Is it scheme based? Where are you going with this defense and how they've been historically bad over the past number of weeks?
Yeah, to quote Nick Sirianni the other day, the third down problems are everywhere. And it's not just one answer. And that is combining Sean Desai's potential solutions and the players of which he's using to try and change those things. I mean, that's an incredible stat that they are perfect as passers in third down and medium from 4 to 7. I mean, those are pivotal moments that can change games. And we've seen it change games the last couple of weeks, especially whenever the 49ers and Cowboys scored 10 straight times. There's no way a defense or a team is even expected to win whenever that happens. So that's for sure of all the offensive problems the Eagles have had. This has been the reason why they've been getting killed recently. Desai said yesterday when I asked him about this stat, is like, obviously it starts with the play call. Well, he hasn't lacked creativity. They've had issues finding stability at the slot ever since Avonte Maddox got hurt in week 2. We've seen him use Eli Ricks, who is an undrafted free agent. Make of that what you will. They signed Bradley Roby, who's a 31-year-old veteran who's been okay in spots, has been bad in others. Make that of what you will. And then on Sunday, we saw his third try at manipulating the secondary. Keely Ringo, rookie cornerback, hadn't played more than 1 snap on defense all season, had been impressing them on special teams, and Nick Sirianni said in practice too, while guarding A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So they fielded a dime defense, and sometimes in nickel, where 5 or 6 defensive backs, they put Ringo in as an outside corner, subbing him in for a linebacker, usually Zach Cunningham. which gave them 6 defensive backs, and they could move their second most reliable defensive back, James Bradbury, inside. So now you've got Darius Slay, who's already been pretty flexible, and then you had Bradbury, who suddenly is now. So that didn't work either. That required confidence in the rest of the secondary to do their job, and there was several third down situations, especially in those medium ranges, where, for one example, they sent 6 on a third down and medium against Dak Prescott, and Kevin Byard was so close to sacking him, but
and Sidney Brown had good coverage there too, but it was just a great throw.
It requires the question of whether there's inside leverage or outside leverage, right?
Yeah.
So Brown, Sidney Brown lets him go inside. And on the other side, if you look, Eli Ricks also got beat inside. So there's 2 guys going inside. Where's the leverage? It's a good question. Like, did they play good compared to whether they were asked in that scheme, which one is a problem because it resulted in 2 wide open people across the middle, or 2, did they not complete the scheme the right way, which is personnel. So the other issue later on in the third down along, Keely Ringo gets beat by Michael Gallup downfield, and if he had hold on to him for just a split second more, Reddick might got to him in a sack. So it's also notable to point out that the pass rush hasn't been very good on third downs either. There have been, at the very best, a middling pass rush in third and medium situations. They did get a third and long strip sack that produced a defensive touchdown, but those kind of game-changing plays are too far in between. So, I mean, there are a lot of questions, a lot of things, and that's the article that I wrote on The Athletic today. So if you can find a lot more in that, but basically we were seeing Desai be creative at least, but those haven't produced any answers. And maybe it's the players, maybe it's what he's doing, but nothing seems to be working right now. So the confidence from Sirianni to say, I have faith that this is going to work, kind of rings empty in some ways, because there hasn't been much to point to in the confidence the last couple of weeks that this could change. So there's not really any other option. What else is Nick going to say? I mean, the rest of the coaching staff is probably going to follow up with the same kind of scheme. So a change on defense really doesn't make too much sense right now. So they can only really just offer confidence in each other that they'll ultimately find the answer, and they certainly hope they would.
Brooks, along those lines, whether it's scheme, whether it's talent, whether they hit a lull or whatever else, the pass coverage against the 2 top MVP candidates, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, the last couple of weeks just hasn't been good enough. Geno Smith isn't in their class. He's just not. And I saw Geno play against the Cowboys just 2 weeks ago, and I was amazed at the passes he completed because he can't throw. He's got a bum elbow. He's got nothing on his throws, but he's getting it out there, throwing it way in advance. They've got some talented wide receivers, and that helped to make Geno at least capable of being able to play, which I didn't think he could. How scared should we be of DK Metcalf? How does he match up? He's a different type receiver than CeeDee Lamb, than what San Francisco has on the outside. He is a different type of animal to himself. Is this a better guy for the Eagles to be facing as the number 1 wide receiver on the other squad, or a worse guy?
Well, that then brings up who matches best with him, because he's just a freak of an athlete. So, yeah, you should. He is scary. And especially if you saw the Cowboys game where he just took off for 80 yards with the fastest breakaway I've seen all season.
Yeah, that's amazing. At like 240.
He's an incredible wide receiver. So the Seahawks seem to have one of the deepest wide receiver cores in the NFL. You've got DK Metcalf, you've got Tyler Lockett, you've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's doing pretty well for a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
Those things require a lot from the secondary. That has been the problem for them the last couple of weeks, is where do they choose their matchups? Who do they trust? Where do they make this happen? And even if Geno Smith doesn't play, he's questionable in this one, we may see Drew Lock again. It still becomes a problem when you wonder about the matchups. I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. I'm glad I'm not Sean Desai and have to sit there and figure out how I have to stop this Seahawks offense. The problem is, what may actually work out in the Eagles' favor is that they're undeniably the worst third down defense in the NFL. The second team is the Seahawks. So this may be the highest scoring game that we've seen all season. And there may be a lot more that we see the offense break through. I have no idea who they'd match up against Metcalf. I guess you would say I would see perhaps a lot more zone in this game because you don't really have the athletes to match up with him man to man.
Yeah. And well, it's ironic because AJ and DK are very close, both Ole Miss guys, and they're both very similar.
Who is AJ not close with? He's close with Debo. He's close with Jalen. He's close with.
I told you,
friends with everybody on the planet.
Great receivers are like that movie Mean Girls. They collect together. They're all friends. Yeah, he's close to Debo. Yeah, you're right. They're all close. But you mentioned the word creative with Sean Desai, and I agree with that, Brooks, because I think he's and Jody can attest to this. I've been saying one of his biggest strengths to me when he got here is willingness to try different things. They were very structured, very boring when Jonathan Gannon was here. They just played what they played, and they were very good, second ranked defense, but they were very structured, maybe because they didn't have to try different things. He's willing to try different things. But I got to tell you, Brooks, at some point, you got to stop and you got to rely on something. And we've heard this a couple times, and now we've heard it again. Simplify. We got to simplify things. Slade brought it up in Los Angeles when they were struggling in the first half against Cooper Kupp, and they were trying to throw poor Eli Ricks against, maybe the best slot receiver in football. And Slade's like, we got to simplify things. Now it's come up again. When you have all these moving parts, and the Eagles keep adding moving parts, whether it's Shaq Leonard on the second level most recently, but obviously Bradley Roby, Kevin Byard, on and on and on and on. Part of it's injury related. You have to do it. But when you have that many moving parts, is he trying too much? Does he have to boil it down?
It's a good question because it does appear that they're tangling themselves in different schematic changes that you don't know what you're good at anymore. You don't know what you can boil it down to and say, you know what, this is who we are as a defense and this works and we're just going to stick with that. Throughout whatever I watched before I showed up in Philadelphia, I'm not quite sure what the base defense is, considering all the changes that they've done in the secondary. We know that they have a stout defensive front. They have a good defensive line. But how they organize themselves beyond that has been adapting because of the changes that have happened and the injuries that happened from the very beginning of the season. So my question would be, simplify to what? What would they choose? What is it that they do best? Because it hasn't been keep their corners on one side of the field. It hasn't been moving Slay to cover the number one receiver. It hasn't been, putting Ringo out there and going more dime. They're searching for what their simplification is, in my opinion. And once they find that, I think that's probably what they'll stick with. If Slay covering the number one receiver locked down everybody, they'd be doing that all the time. If Ringo works out, and maybe he will, he's still developing into his time on the field. It's the most he's ever played on Sunday. Maybe that ends up being the simplified way that they end up doing this. But yeah, I don't know if there's really something you can point to and say, you know what, this is how the 2023 Eagles defense should operate. And you bring up a good point about last year. At least they felt confident about the predictable defense that they had, and that it could work every now and then, or more often than not, most of the time. So it's a major problem that I think is possibly why Sirianni has so much confidence in Desai, because he does have a lot of flexibility into finding the right answer, and they haven't found it yet. So perhaps he's the one that they like better in this situation right now because they don't have something and they need someone to find it.
One of the major differences between this year's team and last year's team is turnovers. Specifically, the beginning of the season, Eagles were phenomenal at turnovers. They slowed over the second half of the season, but they started the year as a takeover machine. Just has not been the case all year this year. I think as a team, they have 4 interceptions, John, or oh no, two apiece and 2 other guys have 1. So they got 6 interceptions in 13 weeks. That's not a whole hell of a lot. If you're Darius Slay, big play Slay, you taking a chance this week? You looking to cheat this week? You looking to jump a route this week? The Eagles could really use a big play from someone in the back 7 of this team. And the only one I really, at this point, have any faith that can actually make that happen by the way he plays the game is big play Slay. You think he kind of, and it could end up him getting burned for a 75-yard touchdown, but do you think he is extra motivated and extra on guard to make a big play this week and steal a ball?
I don't think there's anything extra from Slay, and I don't say that because I don't think he does. I think he does that every week. Just my the way that I've seen him in the locker room and talked to him, it seems like he's been pretty prepared to do that every week. Where I don't know if his break on a ball comes this Sunday, whether he takes more risks in that, possibly because of how they might use him. So, with the Cowboys game, Slay is on the short side of the field, meaning they're trying to make Dak Prescott go to the long side of the field, because on the short side of the field going into that game, they try to isolate a lot of one-on-ones. So Prescott, seeing Slay on the one-on-one, isn't going to challenge him so often. And when he does, it's going to be something he's confident in. So that doesn't really present the opportunity for Slay to even be aggressive, unless it's the one play that's going deep and, you saw him bat a couple of passes away. It's not really the one that you can jump a route for. So if he's in a scenario where Desai is giving him the opportunity to be in short coverage, be in zone, whatever it is, perhaps, but that may be a situation that the rest of the secondary might have to be in. I mean, remember, James Bradbury's interception against Josh Allen came whenever they baited him based on using Slay in different slots. So that was they got the look that they were prepared for and a route that they believed the Bills were going to run, and they did it, and Bradbury jumped it, picked it, and turned the tide of the game. So who is it that they're going to allow in those situations? And I think that is a larger conversation about why the secondary hasn't produced a lot of interceptions. Are they being put in a position to where they can even decide to jump routes, to go for it, to get interceptions? Is that where they're based, instead of just trying to find ways to shut down passing lanes? Are they using themselves as, in a way to be aggressive against the ball? So we'll see how that works out. But I do think that's a focus that needs to be under consideration.
Agreed.
Yeah. At B Kubena, make sure you follow Brooks on X, formerly known as Twitter. Read him at theathletic.com. He's got a great piece up, as he mentioned, exploring the third down woes, and they are everywhere, as Brooks explained. I'll leave it here with you, Brooks. The Eagles went through this stretch and lost 2 games against 2 very good teams. There are 4 10-3 teams. The Eagles just played 2 of the other ones, Baltimore being the other ones. Is it too pessimistic? Is it too everybody goes through this? There's no 13-0 team. San Francisco lost 3 straight. Is this just the natural evolution? Can this help the Eagles? I'll say it that way, as they head towards the playoffs.
Sure. I mean, it definitely can help them. It can hurt them too. And there's many ways that the next 4 games can play out. I'm reminded of when Jason Kelce was talking about whether the 49ers loss could help them before the Cowboys game, and whether things begin to unspool, what happens in those situations. And he said it's not just about one game. It's whenever things start to pile up, and then whenever you start losing confidence in coaching, when you start losing confidence in each other. So has that happened? Have they seen that in the last couple of weeks? Do they start doubting the scheme, the coaches themselves? The next 4 games can do a lot in renewing that confidence against some teams where they should have the advantage. So they talk a lot about they believe in the people they have in the building. They obviously have tons of talent on the roster. They have some coaches who have had reputations of being bright and up and coming, and are in the conversation for potential future head coaching jobs if they prove themselves. So do these next 4 games renew that confidence? If so, yeah, this can help them. If they don't, and it's mediocre or they struggle some more, then that's where you think you have some major issues going into playoffs against teams, probably the same teams that just beat you by a ton.
And that will be hopefully not week number 1, because if the Eagles don't win the number 1 seed, got to get that first playoff victory before you're going to play into a Dallas or San Francisco again. This is Seattle this week. They got to find a way to win the game. Brooks, great stuff. We appreciate you jumping in with us. Hopefully your house doesn't get egged today.
Man. Oh, hopefully this one works. Yeah, works.
I'm going to look outside, see if I got some mail.
Yeah. Or if there's someone with a sign outside ready to protest. You never know. Brooks, thank you very much. Have a safe flight to Seattle. We'll get you back up again in a couple of weeks.
I appreciate it, guys. Anytime.
My pleasure. Thanks, newest beat writer from The Athletic, Brooks Kubena, here with us on Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac coming back. You know what we got to do? Put a bow on the show.